Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about a brief introduction of the human skeleton. Okay, so the human skeleton has 206 bones by the time you become an adult. So most of you, or all of you really, have 206 bones currently in your body. At birth, you have approximately 270 bones. So you're probably wondering, okay, Ms. Dozer, how do I go from 270 to 206? Well, what ends up happening as you're a child or as you're a baby and you're growing, bones tend to fuse together. Okay, so that's ultimately what happens is you have more bones and those bones kind of come together to become one bone. That's why we go down to 206. There are two major divisions when we're talking about bones. We have the axial skeleton and we have the appendicular skeleton. So the axial skeleton consists of the parts that support and protect the organs of the head, neck, and trunk. So we call it the axial because it's sort of like the center. So you can kind of see here that this is the axial. It's highlighted in red here. So it's like the trunk of your body. And the appendicular skeleton consists of the lower and upper limbs and the bones that anchor them to the axial system, the axial skeletal system. So you'll notice that you have the axial system, which is like the trunk, and then the appendicular system is everything connected to the trunk. Okay, so let's talk about the axial system or the axial skeletal system for a second. Let's talk about the skull, okay? The skull has 22 bones in total. So if we think about this, if we have 206 bones in our body, 22 of them are in our skull alone. Okay, that's a lot. And it's important, right? There's a reason why we have 22 bones in our skull. It's to protect our brain, okay? So we first have the cranial bones. There's 8 cranial bones. We have the frontal, the occipital, the sphenoid, the parietal. We have 2 of those, right? Because they're on either side. We have temporal, which again, on either side, that's why we have 2 of them. And then the ethmoid. And then you have facial bones, right? Like protecting your eyes and everything like right here. You have the maxial, the zygomatic, nasal, inferior nasal, the mandible, which is your chin, the platine, and I'm terrible at these words, I'm sorry, the lacrimal, and the vomer. So the real important thing here is that you can identify that there's 22 bones in total. We'll go into further detail about this later in this unit. Okay, continuing with your axial skeletal, you have 26 bones in your vertebrae alone, okay? And you probably have heard this before, and you can kind of feel it. You can feel your vertebrae bones, and the vertebrae is what protects your nerve endings, right? So that's really important to have these vertebrae column bones here present. So you have 7 cervical vertebrae, which is like up on your neck, which connects to your skull. You have 12 thoracic vertebrae, 5 lumbar vertebrae, and then you have your sacrum and your coccyx, which is your tailbone. Continuing with the axial skeleton, you also have this thing called a thoracic cage. And if we're thinking about the skeletal system, like I said with the skull, the whole reason why we have the skeletal system is, yes, to allow us to like stand up and walk around. But the biggest thing for the skeletal system is that it's protecting very vital organs in our body. So the thoracic cage is what protects our lungs and our heart, okay? And there's 25 bones here. So you have your ribs. There's 24 rib bones. There's 12 pairs, right? Because if you split yourself down the center, obviously you're going to have pairs for your rib cage. So you have 7 true ribs and then 5 pairs of false ribs, and you have 1 sternum. Okay, so now let's move from the axial system to the appendicular system. So the appendicular skeleton, if we're talking about the pectoral girdle, there's 4 bones. So this is up here. This is your shoulder bones up here. So if you have your scapula, which is back here, you can feel that. And then you have your clavicle right here. And then we can go into the other things that are like your appendages, and that's why it's called the appendicular system, because these are appendages off of your trunk of your body. So you have 2, and again, you're splitting yourself down the middle, right? So you're going to have 2 of mostly all of these bones. So you have your humerus, which is this bone right here, okay? You have your radius, which there's two bones in this. So you have this humerus, and then you have two bones in the lower part of your arm. So you have a radius here, and you also have an ulna. And you can kind of feel that. Like if you put your hand here, you can feel the two different bones present. Okay. And then you have 16 carpals, which are in your wrist here. And those bones help you move your wrist like this. And then you have these things called metacarpals, which are actually in your hand. So like if I'm looking at my hand here, you can see my knuckles. So those are going to be my metacarpals. And then I have my phalanges, which are actually my fingers up here. Okay, obviously we have two hip bones. You can feel your hip bones down here. And then if we start talking about the lower part of our appendages, so our legs, you have two femurs, which is the top half, so that's where your thigh is. And then your patella is your kneecap, so you can feel your patella there. And then the same thing with the arm, where you have the radius and the ulna. You also have two bones in your lower half of your leg. You have your fibula and your tibia. Okay, so those two bones are attached there. And then your tarsals are where you're starting to get into your, just like in your wrist, your tarsals are the same thing with like your ankle. And then you have your metatarsals, which you'll notice are right here. Again, you can feel those. If you like were to push on the top of your foot, you would feel those tarsals. And then your metatarsals are like your toes. And then you have your metatarsals are the connection to your, I already said metatarsals. I'm sorry. Your metatarsals are like the top of your foot. And then your toes are the phalanges. Okay, there's other bones that we kind of have, and those are the hyoid bone, which is in the throat. It's an attachment for the muscles that allow for swallowing. And then you have really, really tiny bones in your ears. There's 6 tiny bones. So you have 3 in one side and 3 in the other side. Okay, now let's talk about the difference. There's one big difference between the male and female skeleton, and that is the pelvis. And this kind of makes sense, right? Because women are built for childbearing and childbirthing. So our pelvis has to be a little bit wider in order to allow that to occur. So females typically have a broader pelvis with a larger opening, and that again like allows us for childbirth. So you'll notice here, this is the male pelvis. There's no space here. Where down here, there's tons of space, which allows for that childbirthing process. And then females tend to have a lower bone density than men. So a lot of you have probably heard that women tend to get osteoporosis, which is a condition of not very strong bones, and that occurs a lot in women. Okay, so that's why people are always like, drink your milk and make sure you're getting your vitamins in order to, your calcium in order to keep that bone density. And that's it. Thank you.